In 1966, a groundbreaking book was written that could have changed everything we know about our world, but this book was so explosive, it was classified by the CIA for decades. When it was finally declassified, only 57 pages of the original 284 were released, and even those were heavily redacted. So why was this book considered so dangerous that the government had to lock it away for over 60 years? Brace yourself, as what you are about to learn might shatter your understanding of the world. The book is The Adam and Eve Story, written by Chan Thomas, an electrical engineer and researcher. Now, you might hear the title and think this is some biblical retelling of Genesis, but in reality, what Thomas presents is much darker and far more unsettling. His theory revolves around the idea of cyclical cataclysms caused by sudden, devastating pole shifts that wrest civilizations repeatedly. According to Thomas, we are the sixth advanced civilization to rise on Earth, with the previous 5 wiped out by these geological disasters, forcing humanity back to the Stone Age. This idea of a global reset isn't as fringe as it may sound. Just a decade before Thomas, another thinker named Charles Hapgood proposed a similar concept in his book, The Earth's Shifting Crust. Hapgood suggested that the Earth's outer crust could shift dramatically, rearranging continents and causing massive upheaval. At first, mainstream scientists dismissed Hapgood as a pseudoscientist. But over time, some of his ideas have gained traction. Today, we know about plate tectonics, the process by which continents drift apart and collide over millions of years, creating mountain ranges, volcanic activity, and earthquakes. You've probably heard of Pangaea, the ancient supercontinent that existed 200 million years ago and broke apart to form the land masses we live on today. But fewer people know that Pangaea was just one of several supercontinents in Earth's history. There were others like Gondwana and Rodinia, each representing a massive shift in Earth's geography long before human beings ever walked the planet. Hapgood took his theory further in his later book, Path of the Pole. He proposed that the Earth's poles could gradually drift over time, but also shift abruptly, resulting in sudden and catastrophic climate changes. He even speculated that a major pole shift occurred around 9600 BC during the Younger Dryas period, a time of rapid climate shifts that many scientists now believe may have coincided with the end of the last ice age. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence supporting this theory is the ancient Piri Reis map, which was drawn in 1513. The map is significant because it seems to show the coastline of Antarctica, an area wasn't officially discovered until 1820 and was supposed to be buried under ice for millennia. Piri Reis claimed that his map was based on much older source materials, possibly ancient maps from lost civilizations. If Hapgood's theory is correct, then Antarctica might have been free of ice at some point in human history, allowing ancient explorers to chart its coastline. How is that possible? Could these maps be the remnants of an advanced civilization that lived before the last great cataclysm? Hapgood's gradual pole shift theory has gained some credibility. The idea of a rapid and catastrophic shift remains highly controversial. Yet, Chan Thomas took this even further. He claimed that such a pole shift could happen in less than a day, and that the devastation would be unlike anything we could imagine. With a rumble so low as to be inaudible, infusing into a thundering roar, the earthquake starts. Only, it's not like any earthquake in history. In California, mountains shake like ferns in a breeze. A mighty Pacific rears back and piles up into a mountain of seawater, more than 2 miles high. Then starts its race eastward. The wind attacks, shredding everything in supersonic bombardment. The mountain of Pacific seawater follows the wind eastward, burying Los Angeles and San Francisco as if they were but grains of sand. Across the continent, the 1,000-mile-per-hour wind wreaks unholy destruction everywhere, mercilessly. And here's why there's such violent wind. The Earth spins at about 1,000 miles per hour. We don't feel this because everything is spinning together: the land, the water, and the atmosphere. Thomas says that when the pole shift happens, the Earth's air and water continue to spin, but the land masses stop. In many places, the Earth's molten sublayer breaks through and spreads a sea of white-hot liquid fire. In a fraction of a day, all vestiges of civilization are gone, and the great cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, New York, Boston, are nothing but legends. Barely a stone is left where millions walked just a few hours ago. Now, think of what would happen if you were in a car going 1,000 miles per hour that suddenly stopped. Now, think of what would happen if a large city going 1,000 miles per hour suddenly stopped. Skyscrapers would collapse. Millions of people would be thrown around like they were in a food processor. Very few people would survive that. But survivors are the unlucky ones, because moving across the country at the speed of sound is a 2-mile high wall of water, mud, and debris. South America finds that the Andes are not high enough to stop the violence. In less than a day, the entire continent is burned by molten earth fire, buried under miles of violent seas, then turned into a frozen hell. Everything freezes, man, beast, plant, and mud, in less than 4 hours. When the shift happens, the land on Earth stops moving, so the sun stops moving in the sky. That means one side of the Earth is going to get really hot, and the other side really cold. That means even the warmest parts of the planet are going to be 80 degrees below zero. Everything is frozen solid within 4 hours. Europe cannot escape. The Alps, Pyrenees, and other mountain ranges are shrunken, then heaved even higher when the wall of seawater strikes. Western Africa and the sands of the Sahara vanish. The fury marches on for 6 days. During the 6th day, the ocean starts to settle. The Bay of Bengal Basin, just east of India, is now at the North Pole. The Pacific Ocean, just west of Peru, is at the South Pole. New ice caps begin to form in the new polar areas. Greenland and Antarctica, now rotating equatorially, emerge with verdant tropical foliage. Thomas is predicting a 90-degree shift to the Earth's axis, basically turning the planet on its side. The poles move to the equator, and the equator moves to the poles. New York lies at the bottom of the Atlantic, covered by unbelievable amounts of mud. Of San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, and Boston, not a trace is left. The cataclysm has done its work and drives the pitiful few who survive into a new Stone Age. In the first chapter of his book, Dr. Thomas paints a terrifying future. But how likely is it? In the next few chapters, Thomas goes on to not only prove his pole shift is possible, but that it's happened before and will happen again very soon. In fact, there are signs that it may have already begun. It's easy to dismiss it as science fiction, but nearly every ancient culture tells of a great flood. The biblical story of Noah's Ark, the Mayan account of the Hurricane flood, the ancient Hawaiian tale of Nu'u's flood, and the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh. All these stories, and many others, describe a great flood that wiped out civilization. Could these myths be collective memories of real, world-shattering events? Thomas goes even further, claiming that the last major global flood occurred 6,500 years ago. This is supported by some recent discoveries, such as the Gun-Yu flood myth in China, and evidence of catastrophic flooding in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea around the same time. Thomas also suggests that previous floods happened 18,500 years ago, around the time when the Bering Land Bridge between Asia and North America was submerged. What's controversial, though, is his claim that advanced civilizations existed before each of these floods, only to be erased from history by these recurring cataclysms. Let's take a look at the Great Sphinx of Giza. For years, archaeologists have debated its age, with mainstream experts placing its construction around 4,500 years ago during the reign of the pharaoh Khafra. However, some researchers believe that the erosion patterns around the base of the Sphinx suggest that it was exposed to heavy rainfall, something that hasn't occurred in Egypt for over 6,500 years. If this theory holds, it would mean the Sphinx predates Egyptian civilization, possibly by thousands of years. Archaeologists have long resisted this idea, but could the Sphinx be evidence of a civilization that existed before the last great cataclysm? The evidence doesn't stop there. Take Easter Island, for example. Most of us are familiar with the island's iconic Moai statues, the massive stone heads that stand as a testament to the island's mysterious past. But what many people don't realize is that these statues have full bodies, buried deep underground. Why were they buried? Was it a deliberate act by the island's inhabitants, or were they swallowed by some cataclysmic event, buried under mud and debris from a massive flood? Thomas puts forward compelling evidence for his theory of cyclical cataclysms, but the burning questions remain. How and when will it happen? Dr. Chan Thomas lays out a compelling argument for a coming global cataclysm. But when will it happen? To answer that, we have to understand how it occurs. In the story of Adam and Eve, Thomas includes a diagram showing the cross-section of the earth and a description of the process. Now, look at the cross-section of the earth inside the front cover. You'll see two molten layers, the orange ones. The important one is the thin molten layer starting 60 miles down and extending 60 miles deeper to 120 miles below the surface of the earth. The thick, deep molten layer starts 1,800 miles down at the bottom of the mantle and extends 1,300 miles deeper into the outer core. Seismology has proven these two orange layers to be molten, and they are white hot, over 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Dr. Thomas was able to predict seismic activity all over the world. Inside the Earth, the electrical and magnetic structure of the interior makes the layers act as if they were near solid. As long as the magnetic and electrical structure of the Earth maintains its orderliness, it keeps rotating on its axis in a normal manner. Every few thousand years, the magnetic and electrical orderliness in the shallow molten layer is disorganized to the extent that the shallow molten layer is allowed to act as a free liquid, which then serves as a lubricant for the ice caps to pull the shell around the Earth's interior. This causes the ice caps to shift about 90 degrees into the torrid zone. When this event occurs, the layer beneath the Earth's crust turns from solid to liquid. Then, the land masses can slide around freely, and the weight of the ice caps yanks the Earth off its axis. In 1/4 to 1/2 of a day, the geographic poles move to the torrid zone, and all hell breaks loose. Well, that's an understatement. The atmosphere and the Earth's oceans don't shift with the shell. They just keep on rotating from west to east. At the equator, that speed is about 1,037 miles per hour. So, while the shell shifts and the poles move toward the equator, the winds and oceans continue eastward, blowing and flooding across the Earth at supersonic speeds, inundating continents with water miles deep and destroying everything mankind has ever built, including himself. So, when is all this supposed to happen? Thomas initially predicted that the catastrophic pole shift he described would happen around the year 2000. He pointed out that Nostradamus and Edgar Cayce both known for their prophetic claims, also hinted at a major event occurring around the same time. But, as we all know, the year 2000 passed without the world-ending cataclysm. So, should we panic? Let's address a few items in the book and compare them with known science. But first, let's clear up some confusion. There's a lot of misinformation floating around about Chan Thomas's book. Some say he used a fake name because the topic was so controversial, but that's not true. Chan Thomas was a real person. His full name was Dr. Chauncey Powers Thomas, and he was born in Missouri in 1920 and passed away in 1998. He wrote several books, including some upcoming cataclysms, ESP, UFOs, and even a guide to natural childbirth. Another point of confusion involves the book's length and the role of the CIA. Some rumors suggest that the Adam and Eve story was originally 284 pages long, but CIA only released 57 pages. That's not correct. The book was always 57 pages. The table of content shows the conclusion starting on page 45. Some people think the CIA is hiding pages like page 8 or page 18, but those pages are just blank due to their position opposite title pages. In 1966, the year it was classified, Chan Thomas was working at McDonnell Douglas on UFO and anti-gravity technology, and also as a project engineer at Bell Labs on a missile guidance system. He was known to be a highly intelligent but very eccentric. The classified documents were probably part of a background report or just kept under observation. You might hear that the book was banned, but that's not the case. Just this one document was classified. Other copies of the book were still out there. Thomas also released follow-ups in 1971 and 1993, and those weren't classified. As for what's in the book, Thomas doesn't provide solid evidence. He makes a lot of guesses based on old texts and seems to borrow from other theorists like Hapgood and Velikovsky, picking and choosing parts that fit his narrative. For instance, Thomas's idea that ice caps could pull the Earth's crust comes from Hapgood's early work, but even Hapgood later revised his theory. Similarly, Thomas's description of a liquid crust lacks scientific backing. Ice core samples show that Antarctica has been covered in ice for over 1.5 million years, directly contradicting Thomas's claim that it was free of ice within human history. We know that global floods have happened. The evidence is everywhere. But these floods, specifically from the Younger Dryas period, came from melting glaciers, not oceans. Thomas also talks about mammoths being frozen with buttercups in their mouths, which is true for some finds, but the idea of flash freezing a mammoth would require extreme conditions far beyond those that occur naturally. What do you think? Could modern civilization survive another pole shift? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this deep dive into the Adam and Eve story as fascinating and maybe as chilling as I did, make sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss out on our future explorations. Stay curious, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video.